Welcome back, viewers. You're watching WION World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan Chandna.
And I'm Hem Kaur Saroya, and on the show today, there has been a major escalation in the Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking probe. US lawmakers have now subpoenaed former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton for testimony, along with a host of top Democrats. We'll be getting you the latest on this on the show today.
Also on World DNA, Russia inflicted heavy damage yet again on the Kharkiv region in Ukraine, and this is just hours before US envoy Steve Witkoff is expected to hold talks with Russian officials scheduled for today, while Trump's deadline to Russia for a Ukraine ceasefire draws near, which is just a day away on Friday. We'll bring you the latest on that front as well. Let's start with the headlines. This is World DNA.
Officials fear death toll may increase in the aftermath of cloudburst in India's Uttarkashi as rescue teams continue search for people feared washed away in the sudden flash floods. 4 bodies have been recovered so far.
Republican leader Nikki Haley urges the Trump administration to not burn ties with an ally like India. Former US ambassador to the UN calls out Washington for giving China a pass despite its trade ties with Russia.
US envoy Steve Witkoff to meet Russian leadership in Moscow today as President Donald Trump gives Russia a deadline until Friday to halt its offensive in Ukraine or face new penalties.
US lawmakers subpoena former President Bill Clinton and his wife Hillary Clinton for testimony on the Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking probe in a major escalation of the controversy surrounding the investigation.
Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel must complete defeat of Hamas in Gaza to secure the release of remaining hostages, as footage of emaciated captives sparks outrage in Israel, while UN experts warn of the unfolding famine in Gaza.
Lebanon's cabinet asks the army to develop a plan to disarm Hezbollah by the end of this year. Announcement comes shortly after Hezbollah leader says his group would not disarm and warns of resuming attacks on Israel.
Pakistan police fires tear gas at hundreds of supporters of former Prime Minister Imran Khan in Karachi as they protest 2 years of his incarceration. Heavy police presence prevents most rallies from taking place.
Bangladesh's interim leader Mohammad Yunus marks 1 year since the overthrow of Sheikh Hasina by calling on people to seize the opportunity for reform. Announces to hold general elections in February of next year.
Japan marks 80 years since the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, with the ceremony reminding the world of the horrors unleashed. A silent prayer held at 8:15 a.m. local time, the moment when US aircraft dropped the bomb on the 6th of August 1945.
Former Porto captain Jorge Costa dies at the age of 53 after suffering a cardiac arrest. The defender led the Portuguese club to Champions League glory under Jose Mourinho in 2004.
All right, starting with news coming in right now, US President Donald Trump has said that he is unaware that his country imports uranium and fertilizers from Russia, a point that India had highlighted while exposing Western duplicity on Russian trade.
India's Ministry of External Affairs, in a 6-point statement, responded to the recent criticism which came in from Trump's side for India's purchases of Russian oil and tough talks from the EU and US. It is in this statement that India highlighted how US continues to import products from Russia. That includes uranium hexafluoride for America's nuclear industry, palladium for America's EV industry, fertilizers as well as chemicals. And this all happened between the month of January and May this year. US imports from Russia jumped 23% year on year to $2.1 billion, driven by sharp increases in palladium, up 37%, uranium 28%, and fertilizers 21%.
But when asked about the same, Trump said, "I don't know anything about it. I'm going to have to check." And this is the latest that we're getting right now. US President Donald Trump has said that he is unaware that his country imports uranium or fertilizers from Russia.
To give a little more context here, the American president has threatened further tariffs on India for India's purchases of oil from Russia. But when US was called out on its own imports from Russia, he said he has no idea about it. All right, let's listen to what Trump is saying.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
India says that the U.S. imports Russian uranium, chemicals, fertilizers, while criticizing their energy imports. Your response to that, sir?
I don't know anything about it. I'd have to check, but we'll get back to you on that. Yeah, please.
Russia inflicted heavy damage in Ukraine's Kharkiv region, even as Trump's deadline for a Ukraine ceasefire draws near on Friday.
While US envoy Steve Witkoff is expected to hold talks with Russian officials today, Trump has signaled that he will take a decision on Russian oil sanctions after the meeting.
Now, the impact of Russia's drone attack on Kharkiv has left much of Lozova district in shambles. Visuals from the area show the extent of the damage to civilian areas and buildings as well as the railways. According to the regional governor, at least 34 drone strikes hit the region, leaving 2 people dead while 10 others injured. He added that there was no military facilities near the impact sites and called it an act of terror.
I emphasize that only civilian infrastructure was damaged. There was no military equipment or military facilities in these areas during the strikes. Therefore, this is another act of terror against our civilian population.
US President Donald Trump has announced that he will decide on imposing sanctions on countries buying Russian oil after a meeting with Russian officials scheduled for today.
US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is already on his way to Moscow to meet with the Russian leadership, aiming to discuss Ukraine-related issues and potential ceasefire agreements. And this comes as Trump gave Putin until this Friday to make progress towards peace in Ukraine or face even tougher sanctions.
You know, they have a meeting tomorrow. We have a meeting with Russia tomorrow. We're going to see what happens. We'll make that determination at that time.
Ukrainian President Zelensky says he had a productive phone conversation with the US President, discussing ways to pressure Russia into ending the war, severe sanctions on Russia, and defense cooperation between Ukraine and the US on drone production.
Today I spoke with President Trump. The most important thing is about ending the war. He is very well informed. He knows about the Russian strikes. He knows about the situation on the front, that the Russians are now trying to make the strikes more intense. We in Ukraine fully support the American proposal for an immediate ceasefire.
Now, Zelensky also expressed gratitude to European countries for purchasing $1 billion worth of US weapons for Ukraine, bolstering Ukraine's defense capabilities.
Yesterday, the Netherlands decided to provide $500 million. And today, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark decided to provide a total of $500 million. These funds will be used to purchase American weapons, including missiles for the Patriot system. Thank you.
Now, Lebanon's cabinet has directed the army to draw up a plan to disarm Hezbollah by the end of the year,
marking the first such initiative since Lebanon's warring factions relinquished their weapons decades ago. Now, this decision comes amid intense pressure from the United States.
The government tasks the Lebanese army with setting an implemental plan to solely restrict arms before the end of this year to the parties specified in the announcement for the cessation of hostilities, and present it to the cabinet before the end of this month for discussion and approval.
Now, the cabinet held a nearly 6-hour cabinet session headed by President Joseph Aoun on disarming the group, which emerged badly weakened from the latest war, with its arsenal pummeled and its senior leadership decimated.
Now, the cabinet is to continue discussions this week on a proposal from the US envoy Tom Barrack that includes a timetable for Hezbollah's disarmament. Now, Hezbollah's chief Naim Qasim, in a televised address while the cabinet meeting was underway, said that it would not disarm, Hezbollah would not disarm until Israeli attacks continue.
With regards to Lebanon, any timetable presented for implementation under the shadow of Israeli aggression cannot be agreed to. The state must develop plans to confront pressure and threats and ensure protection, rather than deprive its citizens of their capabilities and strength and deprive its resistance, Hezbollah, of its capabilities and strength.
Now, the Iran-backed group is the only faction that kept its weapons after Lebanon's 1975 to 1990 civil war, doing so in the name of resistance against Israel, which occupied the country's south until 2000.
Now, according to reports, Israel has kept up raids on Lebanon despite the November truce, mostly saying that it is striking Hezbollah targets and has threatened to keep doing so until the group has been disarmed.
Last week, President Aoun declared Lebanon's commitment to stripping all armed groups, including Hezbollah, of their weapons and placing them under army control. He described the country as being at a crucial crossroads, warning that Lebanon now faces a clear choice between collapse and stability.
It's been a year since the ouster of Sheikh Hasina from Bangladesh, and the country now still awaits a democratically elected government.
In the meantime, though, the interim government led by Muhammad Yunus is holding on to the duties of governance. Marking the first anniversary of the mass student-led uprising, thousands of Bangladeshis carried out a massive rally in the capital city of Dhaka.
Roads were covered with Bangladeshi flags. Demonstrators marched down the street hand in hand. The show of unity and demand for a better country echoed on the ground.
August 5th reminds us that people united and rose against tyranny. People want to ensure that such authoritarian attitudes and tendencies are never seen again, neither in those currently in power nor in those who may come to power in the future.
The sentiments at the top also remain the same. In his address to the nation, the country's interim leader Muhammad Yunus vowed to stand against oppression and promised an accountable democratic state.
Today, we have not come merely to remember the past, we have come to take a pledge that we will never bow down to any form of oppression, and that we will establish an accountable, humane, democratic and egalitarian state, a state that will always work for the welfare of its people.
As Bangladesh's revolution stands at the crossroads, two major concerns that face the Yunus government are bringing Hasina back in the country to face the law and conducting free and fair elections as soon as possible.
Sheikh Hasina remains in India, far from the reach of the Bangladeshi interim government. Meanwhile, the trials and the convictions against her continue in Bangladesh. Not just on the legal front, but Bangladesh's government is working to paint Hasina as a dictator in the national psyche of Bangladesh. Once a heavily guarded palace of Sheikh Hasina is being turned into a museum, and this will serve as a lasting reminder of her rule in Bangladesh. The luxurious Dhaka palace, known as Gono Bhavan, was stormed by thousands of demonstrators after she fled to India on the 5th of August last year.
Now, the July revolution, it gave rise to fundamentalist renaissance in Bangladesh. With the tax on minorities and growing popularity of populist political forces, Muhammad Yunus-led government faces a challenge to maintain law and order in the country.
On the return of electoral democracy, Yunus declared that elections could be held in April of 2026 and possibly as soon as February. With no official confirmation, these dates can be pushed even further. Political parties are itching for elections, but the question remains, will Hasina's party be allowed in these elections? Will there be a neutral political playground for all political forces before the polls?
And a new poll revealed a disturbing truth. Groceries, not rent or loans, are now America's biggest source of financial stress.
Donald Trump, his proposed tariffs could make that even worse. All the while, when job data is giving mixed signals. Is the US staring at an economic crisis wrapped in inflation and, of course, political chaos? More in this next report. Take a look.
Donald Trump's chaotic tariffs are already bleeding our economy of good-paying jobs.
This is truly the dawn of the golden age of America. That's what we're in.
It's not war, not taxes, not gas prices, it's groceries. The dinner table has become the battleground for America's middle class. An AP Norc poll paints a bleak picture. More than half of Americans say they're stressed about affording food, not credit card debt, not student loans, not child care, just milk, eggs, meat, and vegetables. The essentials have become luxuries.
The poll found that 53% of Americans say the cost of groceries is a major source of stress, and 47% said this about the cost of housing. One thing that really stands out in the data is that only 14% of Americans say the cost of groceries is not a source of stress for them right now. So even if it's not a major source of stress for everyone, this is something that's being felt by Americans across many different subgroups.
The latest jobs report landed like a punch in the gut. Despite the White House's insistence, the labor market is slowing much faster than the president claims. Hiring is down, and after months of relentless inflation, families are feeling squeezed like never before.
Price is killing me. Instead of saving money in my bank account, I'm using it in groceries.
I got a lot of stress at home, and now when I come to the grocery store, it just raised the level of stress up, and it's mentally messing with me. Because my attitude when I go home, anybody say anything out the way after I come from the grocery store or the Family Dollar, wherever, I click.
The prices seems to go up every week, every month. But every time I come, I see the difference in the price, especially fruits.
Economists are beginning to detect early warning signs in world's biggest economy. Second quarter GDP increases at 3.0% rate, but it masks the underlying slowing trend. Spending was lifted by motor vehicles, likely reflecting preemptive buying ahead of import duties. Core inflation, which excludes volatile food and energy prices, also rose 0.3% in June. Job creation has dropped below expectations for the second straight month. U.S. employers added 73,000 jobs in July, down from the prior month and lower than economists expected. Real wages are stagnating. With the American economy tiptoeing on a slippery slope, the real push comes from Trump tariff. While the U.S. president promises that in the long run it would reap benefits. But for the average American consumer, tariffs trickles down like a tax. Importers are bound to raise prices to cover the duty. This reflects in the grocery bills, construction materials, appliances, and cars. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Now, a devastating July earthquake in Russia's Far East may have done more than rattle the ground.
Satellite images and Western intelligence now suggest that it crippled one of Moscow's most secretive nuclear submarine bases. If this is true, it marks a rare low for Russia's underwater military dominance, delivered not by NATO, but by nature. Take a look at this report.
This was no minor tremor. The earthquake was the region's fiercest since 1952. The 8.8 magnitude quake struck in Russia's far eastern Kamchatka coast on the 30th of July. It triggered tsunami warnings as far away as Japan, US, and Chile. It was followed by an eruption of the most active volcano on the peninsula. While the world's eyes were fixed on tsunami warnings arching from Japan to Chile, disaster slipped past sonar and steel. Satellite photos revealed the damage with chilling clarity. A floating pier, newly built since the Ukraine war, was torn from its anchor and cast adrift. A vital artery for the movement and support of nuclear-powered submarines. While Moscow is refusing to comment, international nuclear monitors have so far reported no abnormal radiation. A narrow escape given the base's proximity to Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, where city residents felt the quake's full force. The timing couldn't be worse for the Kremlin. Trump ordered the deployment of 2 submarines close to Russia. Again, with Russian forces stretched in Ukraine and the West tightening economic pressure, this strike is a setback for Russia's nuclear deterrence posture in the Asia-Pacific. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Cardiovascular diseases have got hold of every age group, becoming a major health concern,
causing millions of deaths annually. According to data by the World Health Organization, heart disease led to an estimated 17.9 million deaths each year, a toll that can easily be reduced if proper measures are taken. Cardiologists say adding exercise to routine and sticking to an anti-inflammatory diet that is high in fiber can do wonders.
Now, many factors contribute to heart diseases. Some of them are preventable if one adjusts certain lifestyle factors. The key to keep heart ailments at bay: get moving.
Now, moderate exercise such as brisk walking, cycling, all of these things can help. Know your numbers, keep a track of cholesterol levels, and get a time-to-time check of vitamin levels as well as BMI.
Of course, most important of all is you need to eat clean, including vibrant greens in your diet, along with nuts and seeds as well. High blood pressure or hypertension is one of the leading causes of chronic illnesses, including heart disease, stroke, and this happens worldwide. But cardiologists are convinced most cases of heart diseases are preventable. They say lifestyle changes can help manage and even reverse them.
All right, with that, it's time now for a short break.
Don't go anywhere. This is World DNA. On the other side of this short break, cloudburst triggered flash floods, and that continues to wreak havoc in Uttarkashi district of Uttarakhand in India, sweeping away homes, shops and roads. Several people are feared trapped. We'll bring you all the details.
A major trade shakeup looms this week as markets brace for a new tariff deadline on the 7th of August. The plan includes tariffs ranging from 10% to 50% under a so-called reciprocal model.
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at yowon.com.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Prime Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching World DNA with him. I'm Shivan. Lots more to discuss. Let's start with the headlines.
The US imports Russian uranium, chemicals, fertilizers while criticizing their energy imports. Your response to that, sir?
I don't know anything about it. I'd have to check, but we'll get back to you on that.
Donald Trump reacts to India, citing the United States doing trade with Russia, says he's unaware that the US imports uranium and fertilizers from Russia.
The rest of it, I really can't say. That's going to be pretty much up to Israel. Yep.
Trump declines to say whether he supports or opposes a potential military takeover of Gaza by Israel, as his administration's focus is on increasing food access to the Palestinian enclave.
I also think we have incredible people, some of the people on the stage right here. So it's too early, obviously, to talk about it, but certainly he's doing a great job, and he would be probably favored at this point.
Donald Trump says Vice President J.D. Vance would probably be favored at this point to succeed him in the next run of the White House.
Republican leader Nikki Haley urges the Trump administration to not burn ties with an ally like India. Former US ambassador to the UN calls out Washington for giving China a pass despite its trade ties with Russia.
US envoy Steve Witkoff to meet the Russian leadership today, as President Donald Trump gives Russia a deadline until Friday to halt its offensive in Ukraine or face new penalties.
US lawmakers subpoena former President Bill Clinton and his wife Hillary Clinton for testimony on Jeffrey Epstein in a major escalation of the controversy surrounding the investigation into the notorious sex offender.
Lebanon's cabinet asked the army to develop a plan to disarm Hezbollah by year-end. Announcement comes shortly after Hezbollah leader says his group would not disarm and warns of resuming attacks on Israel.
Officials fear the death toll may increase in the aftermath of the cloudburst in India's Uttarkashi as rescue teams continue search for people feared washed away in the sudden flash floods. 4 bodies have been recovered so far.
From food to machinery, US companies are feeling the pinch. Tariffs, rising costs and weak demand are slashing profits. Major firms warn of billions in losses as global earnings take a $15 billion hit this year.
Former Porto captain Jorge Costa dies at the age of 53 after suffering a cardiac arrest. The defender led the Portuguese club to Champions League glory under Jose Mourinho in 2004. Donald Trump said that he is unaware that America imports uranium and fertilizers from Russia. Now, this was a point that India highlighted while exposing Western duplicity on Russian trade in response to Trump's remarks that he is going to impose heavy tariffs on India.
Now, India's Ministry of External Affairs in a 6-point statement had responded to the recent criticism of its purchase of Russian oil and tough talks from the EU and the United States. In its statement, India said that US continues to import from Russia uranium hexafluoride for its nuclear industry, palladium for its EV industry, fertilizers, as well as chemicals. Between January and May this year, in fact, US imports from Russia jumped 23% year-on-year to $2.1 billion, driven by a sharp increase in palladium, up 37%, uranium up 28%, and fertilizers 21%.
But when Trump was asked about these imports from Russia that America continues to have, Trump said he doesn't know. I don't know anything about it. I have to check, quote unquote. That's what the American president has said in response to what India highlighted. Listen to this.
India says that the US imports Russian uranium, chemicals, fertilizers, while criticizing their energy imports. Your response to that, sir?
I don't know anything about it. I'd have to check, but we'll get back to you on that. Yeah, please.
India says that the US imports Russian uranium, chemicals, fertilizers, while their energy imports. Your response to that, sir?
I don't know anything about it. I'd have to check, but we'll get back to you on that. Yeah, please.
And that was the American president saying he doesn't know anything about the imports that US is having from Russia, which includes fluoride.
Of course, the Russian...
That's uranium hexafluoride for its nuclear industry, palladium for its EV industry, fertilizers and chemicals. Just to highlight for our viewers, this was a point that India raised in its response to what Trump said, that he's going to levy heavy taxes on and tariffs on India for importing oil from Russia and continuing to do so. India highlights that America continues to import from Russia as well. So then why is India being targeted? And these are unjustified statements and unreasonable. All right, to discuss this further, just to get a better understanding of what really happened here, we'll connect with our Assistant Director for Foreign Affairs, Siddhant Sibal. Siddhant, that was a quick response from the US President, one line, and that was the end of that answer. Give us more.
Well, essentially, the U.S. President dubbed the question, a direct question on how the United States continues to rely on Russia for resources at a time when he has been doubling down on India, lashing at India, saying that India is fueling the war in Ukraine. India is importing the energy from Russia. Of course, India has also hit back at the Trump administration with a very long statement, which we saw on Monday evening. But essentially, India's focus has been to highlight what the West has been doing, because in that statement, it was also the European Union that India fact-checked in many ways by giving details about how European Union is dependent on Russia for resources. So clearly, New Delhi showing the mirror to both Brussels and Washington that when they point finger, they should know that they are also equally dependent. Now, Donald Trump's comments, essentially, which is basically ducking down and he passing off the question, basically shows perhaps two things. First, Donald Trump being Donald Trump has no idea about a lot of facts. The president has been fact-checked several times, or it could be deliberate strategy, though I really doubt that he is not keen to speak about it, and instead he is keen to lash on India. In fact, yesterday in the social media post, he clearly said that in 24 hours he's going to raise the tariff substantially on India. So it's a matter of few hours that there could be an announcement.
Right, absolutely, Siddhant. Of course, we are seeing the statements that are coming out from both sides. We've seen the guarded and measured statement, a fact-based statement that came from India, which of course highlights the duplicity when it comes to the United States and EU doing trade with Russia. Now, not just trade, we are also seeing that there are in fact jumps in the numbers also that we're seeing in imports from Russia to the United States, 23% year on year, $2.1 billion. Now, these are big numbers, and of course from Trump's side, he seems to be unaware of any such dealings with.
He's claiming to be.
At least that's what he's claiming right now. That being said, do you think effective diplomacy can yield favorable results for India in the days to come?
Well, with Donald Trump, I think diplomacy can be a little difficult word because essentially we know that India is always keen to use the diplomatic conversations, but Donald Trump has made it clear that he is not interested in that. Almost over 35 times he has claimed his involvement in the India-Pakistan understanding, the ceasefire understanding of May. India, of course, has several times, including the Indian Prime Minister in the Parliament, also really fact-checking what Donald Trump has been saying. So, in this case, it looks like the motives are very different for the continuous badgering of India by Donald Trump. It could be something very different as well. He, of course, is also in the Nobel Peace Prize race as well. So, when it comes to diplomacy, right now, I do not feel very optimistic that any diplomacy with Donald Trump will work, but only time will tell.
All right, Siddhant, thanks so much for getting us the latest. And it just goes to show how tactfully India responded to Trump's attempted badgering of India through social media for importing oil from Russia. One question back to Trump, and he had to duck that one, going past it within a one-line answer. That was Siddhant Sibal getting us the latest. We will be tracking what's coming next between the India and US very closely.
All right, then cloudburst triggered flash floods continue to wreak havoc in Uttarkashi district of Uttarakhand, sweeping away homes, shops, roads.
And these were devastating visuals. Several people are feared trapped. Two cloudbursts, one in Dharali and another in the Sukhi top area, caused widespread destruction, with Dharali bearing the brunt. Rescue and relief efforts are ongoing, led by the Indian Army, Indo-Tibetan Border Police Force, the ITBP, and National Disaster Response Force as well, the NDRF, and the State Disaster Response Force. Now, according to government officials, at least 130 people have been rescued so far. This even as the Weather Department has issued warnings for heavy rainfall across the state, especially in the hilly districts.
Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to Uttarakhand Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami to take stock of the situation. Dhami returned from Andhra Pradesh in the wake of the disaster, headed straight to the State Emergency Operations Centre in Dehradun, where he has been coordinating relief and rescue efforts along with senior officials of the administration, police and others.
Now, while speaking to ANI, the Uttarakhand Chief Minister said that the Prime Minister as well as the Home Minister of India have assured all possible support from the central government. According to officials, the market area in Dharali village was completely swept away due to rising water levels. A mudslide in the Kirgad area triggered a sudden flow of debris and water through the settlement.
Indian Air Force Chinook Mi-17 V5 ALH and Cheetah helicopters are on active standby at the Chandigarh Air Base, ready to deploy with equipment and relief material as soon as weather conditions improve here.
And history has been made in Indian politics. Union Home Minister Amit Shah became India's longest-serving Union Home Minister. This happened on Tuesday.
Completing 2,258 days in office since taking charge on the 30th of May 2019. This milestone surpasses the tenures of both L.K. Advani, who served for 2,256 days, and Govind Ballabh Pant, who held the position for just over 6 years.
Prime Minister Modi congratulated the Home Minister on this political milestone at the NDA Parliamentary Party meeting. Prime Minister praised his leadership, vision and role in reshaping India's internal security landscape. The timing, of course, is symbolic. This historic achievement comes exactly 6 years after the abrogation of Article 370, a decision carried out under Amit Shah's leadership and seen as a cornerstone of his legacy.
Now, Amit Shah's tenure as Home Minister has been marked by several defining moments. He led a sustained crackdown on terrorism and strengthened border management. The stalwart BJP leader pushed for modernization of police forces and took a firm stance on internal security challenges, including insurgency in the northeast and the Maoist violence.
Notably, Amit Shah has pledged to eliminate Naxalism by March of next year, calling it the final frontier in restoring full peace and control over affected areas. Now, with over 6 years in the role, Amit Shah enters the record books, not just for longevity, but for the impact of the decisions taken during his time in office.
And the interim leader of Bangladesh, Mohammad Yunus, has made a major announcement.
He said that the country will hold elections in February of next year, 2026. Announcement comes as the country marks 1 year since the ouster of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. While addressing the media, Yunus said that elections will be concluded before Ramzan next year. He also added that as the leader of a caretaker government, he will step down after the vote.
We will step into the final and most important phase after delivering this speech to you, and that is the transfer of power to an elected government. On behalf of the interim government, I will write a letter to the Chief Election Commissioner requesting that the election be arranged before Ramadan in February 2026.
Meanwhile, thousands of student activists from various political groups celebrated and marched peacefully through the streets of Dhaka yesterday, marking the first anniversary of the mass student-led uprising that forced former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to resign after 15 years in power. They called it the second liberation while chanting slogans for a better Bangladesh.
August 5 reminds us that people united and rose against tyranny. People want to ensure that such authoritarian attitudes and tendencies are never seen again, neither in those currently in power, nor in those who may come to power in the future.
However, in her statement, former Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, described the day as a dark moment in the history of Bangladesh. She said, "No regime can suppress the will of a nation forever, and their struggle is not over." Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh's longest-serving Prime Minister, was forced to flee to India after a protest movement escalated into violent clashes in Bangladesh last year.
Now, the protest, which began over a 30% government job quota for independence fighters and their descendants, resulted in over 300 deaths. Defying curfews and military presence, protesters stormed Hasina's official residence, prompting her to flee and take refuge in India.
A major trade shake-up looms this week as markets brace for a new tariff deadline of August 7th.
Now, this plan includes tariffs ranging from 10% to 50% under a so-called reciprocal model. Countries like Switzerland and India face the immediate brunt. Switzerland could be hit with a 39% tariff, prompting its president to fly to Washington for urgent talks.
India, meanwhile, has already been hit with 25% tariffs, with Trump suggesting a very substantial hike, which could come within 24 hours. Meanwhile, a deal to delay the August 12th tariff snapback on China is reportedly close, though markets remain on edge amid mixed signals. Trump has also turned his focus to sector-specific tariffs. He confirmed in a televised interview that new levies on pharmaceuticals and semiconductors are in the pipeline, with pharmaceutical tariffs potentially reaching up to 250% over the next 18 months. Initially, a smaller rate will be imposed, but the president said he plans to raise it to a 150%, then 250% in a bid to revive domestic drug manufacturing in the US.
Alongside tariff threats, Trump is ramping up pressure on drug pricing. In May, he signed an executive order invoking the most favored nation national policy, aiming to tie US drug prices to lowest in other developed nations. The pharmaceuticals industry has warned that such sweeping changes combined with tariffs could instead drive up costs, destabilize supply chains, and undermine research investments already strained by earlier policy shifts. Now, India's economic affluence is forcing global brokerages to bet on the world's fastest growing major economy.
But while the uber-rich get richer, there's another shadow that's lurking for the rest. Take a look as we explore India's wealth snapshot and assess the opportunities and the risks associated with it.
India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, but this story is more than just the GDP numbers. Reports suggest India's household wealth is close to $20 trillion. Foreign brokerages are taking notice of India's wealth boom now. A new report by global investment firm Bernstein paints a picture of rapid affluence. Just 1% of Indian households now control nearly 60% of the country's total assets. They own a staggering $11.6 trillion out of India's estimated $19.6 trillion in total household wealth. But here's the surprising part. Despite this massive wealth, only a small portion is invested in actively managed financial instruments like mutual funds, stocks, or insurance. The rest, around $8.9 trillion, remains locked up in traditional, non-liquid assets like real estate, gold, and idle cash. This reflects a strong preference for physical assets, rooted in culture, security concerns, and decades of informal investing habits. For global wealth managers, this presents a massive opportunity. With more Indians entering the affluent class and looking to diversify, India is emerging as one of the world's most promising markets for financial advisory services. Still, this boom has a shadow. The wealth isn't evenly spread. The top 1% has considerable financial wealth, but the remaining 99% of the population continues to share a far smaller slice. A reminder that while India's affluence is rising, so is its wealth gap. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
And it's over to sports. A bidding war has broken out between Premier League rivals Manchester United and Newcastle United over striker Benjamin Šeško.
Both clubs have reportedly submitted competing offers for the in-demand RB Leipzig forward. According to reports in the German media, the Red Devils have made an initial bid of just under $98 million for the 22-year-old centre-forward. Meanwhile, Newcastle have tabled a second bid worth a similar amount after their initial offer. A disappointing league campaign for Leipzig last season.
Both Manchester United and Newcastle United are in search for a striker. For Manchester United, it's about rebuilding after their worst top-flight campaign in 51 years. The Red Devils finished 15th in the Premier League and lost to Tottenham Hotspur in the Europa League final. Newcastle, who qualified for the Champions League, see Šeško as a potential replacement for Wanderway striker Alexander Isak, and United's bid for Šeško could have ramifications for Isak, as Newcastle will only let the Swede leave if they can bring in a ready-made replacement. Malaysian Oscar winner Michelle Yeoh stepped out in Los Angeles to launch the English language version of the hit Chinese animation Neja 2.
Now, the movie, which is the undisputed champion of the international box office crown, made more than $2 billion at the theatres. American studio A24 has partnered with CMC Pictures to bring the English language version of the globally successful Chinese animated film to theatres in the United States, Canada, Australia and New Zealand on the 22nd of August. The English language cast includes voice actor Crystal Lee in the titular role of Neja, with Academy Award winner Michelle Yeoh as his mother.
In the global box office, the film has surpassed the second highest grossing film Lilo and Stitch by nearly $900,000. A sequel to the 2019 film, the 2025 release follows Neja, a rebellious young boy who is feared by the gods and born to mortal parents with wild, uncontrolled powers. He's faced with an ancient force intent on destroying humanity and must grow up to become the hero the world needs. Now, most of the mythological movies' box office income came from mainland China, starkly in contrast to Hollywood films, which typically rely on a more global distribution strategy.
Now, not many would know, but Neja 2 is based on 16th century Chinese novel, The Investiture of the Gods. It depicts a hero boy with magic powers who tried to defend a fortress town. And with that, we call a wrap on this edition of World DNA.
And before we slip into a short break, here are all the climate stories making headlines across the world. Stay with us. This is WION World is One.
India's Global Voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is One.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions.